It's 7 o'clock on the clock in front of me, so we'll make a start. Can I welcome everyone to this first meeting of the municipal cycle, first meeting of the audit committee, that will be my first meeting of the audit committee as well. Minutes of the last meeting have been circulated. Can I ask those members who were at the last meeting if they can confirm that those are accurate records? Yeah. In which case I shall sign them. Okay. Absence of members, I think we're all here. Declaration of members' disposal of pecuniary interests and non-pecuniary interests, please end. No? Public comments and questions, if any. We have some questions which have been circulated and answers which have been circulated. Questions came, all of them, I think, from Mr. Dishman, and I understand Mr. Dix, you're going to ask some supplementary questions or questions on each of the do have a seat.
Yes, Mr. Dishman has seen the replies and has sent me his supplementary questions. So these are his supplementary questions. No supplementary on question 1. On question 2, it says, agreed that this is a period, this is the period up to 2012-13. What Mr. Dishman says is, what does the unclear phrase, a period up to, actually mean in terms of the earliest date referred to?
Right. Okay, thank you.
Okay, no supplementary on question 3. On question 4, how often are proactive reviews carried out? As the last one, evidenced by DPR 2065, was in June 2013.
We'll stay there.
Okay, in terms of there's sort of 2 issues here. If issues are raised with
Sorry, can people hear Mr. Jones? You can share.
If issues are raised through the statutory process and PCNs are subsequently cancelled, then that's a different issue to PCNs that would be noted written off as uncollectible. So that process is done at the end of each financial year. We are monitoring bailiff activity on a monthly basis, so we know what is being returned from bailiff companies as uncollectible throughout the year. And when the accounts are dealt with at the end of the financial year, that is when the collective of what the current debt is and what needs to be written off from that debt would be dealt with through the accounts.
All right.
The next number 5. The previous write-off in June 2013 was 3.8 million and covered 2.8 million for 2009 to 2011, 800,000 for 11-12, and 390,000 for 12-13. That makes a further write-off now for 12-13, having a 30,000 looks somewhat low. Would you agree?
Without actually looking in a great deal more detail than I have, as to how these things are dealt with and how and when they're dealt with, I don't think I can comment on whether that appears allow or not? Paul might have a different idea.
Yeah, I mean, the comment about the builder meant that there was obviously a large amount written off of the 3.8 million that's been mentioned. But having gone through that process, which covered a number of years, that formula that were cleared out a lot of the older stuff out of the system and left us with debts that we believe at that point to be collectible. Subsequent things move on, and therefore there are further outstanding items that then become deemed as uncollectible, and that's where the 29,600 additional amount comes from in that particular year. Hopefully that helps to clarify that.
Okay, number 6. Has there been a write-off exercise apart from the 29,600, as if the balance unpaid from DPR 2065, the 5.8 million, is added to the estimated value of 165,000 PCNs issued in 2013-14, and then the amount paid in 2013-14 is 7.1 million. Missed addition makes the balance unpaid at least 5 million, which rather implies that there has been a large write-off.
I think that the answer that's been given here is in relation to the question that was asked, which was what was unpaid for the year of 2013-14. So the 3 million figure is in relation to PCNs in the 13-14 year, not in relation to all PCNs that will make outstanding at that point in time. So it's correct that that figure would be higher in terms of all outstanding unpaid up to that point in time.
Right. So in response to the reply, Mr. Dishon says, how do such glaring errors get past both the external auditor, the Section 151 officer, and the committee chair?
I can answer the last one of those. It wasn't me. It wasn't me. Sorry, not me, though. How did we get past the section of the first place?
It was to what Mr. Dishon's supplementary.
And in relation to question, Mr. Vice.
Sorry, it's in relation to question 7. So it's to do with, it says here, the original contract time scale provided 3 months leave because of the delays in the contract being let the go live was moved to into the. So he's saying, why was there this glaring error?
I'm not sure.
Do you want me to take on?
Yeah.
Actually, there's one correction I'd like to make on the answer here. That the 3 month leaving, as has been noted in the answer, was actually 4 months that was the leaving period in the contract. The intention, therefore, would be, in order to start on the 1st of April, that the award of the contract would have had to have happened at least 4 months prior. And as it didn't happen that quickly, I think it was delayed, mainly due to a challenge from one of the other bidders, delayed the award of the contract. And therefore, the leading period given 4 months would have taken us beyond the 1st of May. It was by agreement with NSL that they were to start on the 1st of May. It actually meant that they only had, I believe, about a less than a 3 month leading period. So hopefully that helps to clarify that situation.
So in relation,
Number 8.
in relation to number 8, what efforts were made to obtain compensation from NSL, given that debts die of old age and the baby service was part of the contract specification from day one, not from when it finally started some months later?
There isn't a need to claim anything from NSL because there weren't any losses related to that delay. There was still a contract that the council had with the existing boat companies, of which there was 4 of them, which didn't expire until August of 2012. We clearly would have liked NSL to have had the arrangements in place to have started with their boat companies immediately on the expiry. but they weren't in a position to do that for a couple of months after. But 2 months delay means a bit of backlog build up. It doesn't mean that there's a time out in terms of recovery of those costs.
Number 9, is a bailiff entitled to pass data about residents of Barnet when he is not instructed on the PCN in question? As at that point, the PCN is not a debt, as an order of recovery has not been authorised by the Traffic Enforcement Centre.
Well, the information that is a minimum information that we require to be provided in order that we don't incur the council with additional costs unnecessarily, is what is provided to the bailiff company to do their project checks. That's due to the fact that there is a cost of each debt that's registered with 7 accounts, and clearly we don't have any registering debts that ultimately are not going to be recoverable.
Thank you. Number 10, given that the council hasn't seen the contract with bailiffs, how does it know that it is keeping the data safe and not sharing it with other local authorities who happen to be its clients and or breaching the Data Protection Act by, say, processing outside the EPA?
There are several provisions in the contracts in relation to data protection, as there would be in any contracts awarded by the council. That is within the KPI pack in terms of these being reported and monitored in terms of the reporting requirements there. So we're not aware of any specific issues that have been identified to us. If there were, then we had to review the contract to deal with.
Okay. Which bailiff company or companies is sent the data?
It would be the 2 bailiff companies that NSL contracted with, which is Task and Newlands.
And number 12, doesn't the council think it really ought to have a copy of the contract of the bailiffs as it has a duty of care as to their behaviour?
Okay, we don't retain a copy of the contract because the contract is between NSL and the bailiff companies directly. There's a requirement in our contract with NSL that they have that in place. We do have copies of the sort of agreements that they have with both bailiff companies, and we actively monitor that, and where necessary we make suggestions of amendments that need to be made, as we have done recently in regard to changes to legislation requiring changes to be made to this law.
Number 13, does the council think it has been reckless in having no contract monitoring in place for this most important enforcement role, as enforcement agents are agents of and act in the name of the council? I mean, it's the council's reputation that suffers when bailiffs behave badly.
Can I just clarify, are you suggesting that there is no way that we can monitor the activity of the bailiff companies? Is that the reason for that comment?
It's very difficult for you to predict what he
It
has.
is way ahead of his head.
You have to ask the organ grinder.
I'll give you a
Let me give a response to that.
Because you don't have the contract, I think he said if you don't have the contract, you can't monitor it.
Because we have a copy of the service level agreement, we know exactly what the requirements are in terms of what the expectations are of the services delivered by bailiff companies. We do not have any issues with anything within those service level agreements because they are pretty standard. As I said to the answer to the previous question, as and when there is a need to update them, and certainly if there's statutory changes, we're making sure that those changes are made. And NSL and the two local companies are working proactively with us to ensure that that happens. So we've not had any problems with any of the parties that we're dealing with in terms of not taking on board any suggestions and changes that will be required. There are provisions within the contract in terms of change control procedures that we could use if needs be. So if they weren't going to be as cooperative as they have been, there are provisions we could use to ensure that we get the changes we require. But as I say, they have been proactive, they've been helpful in that regard, so we haven't had need to do that. In terms of the monitoring, we do receive reports on a monthly basis on the activity of both companies and the activity in relation to what NSL are doing about the information they're receiving as well. And again, the information we receive suggests to us that the performance of both Bailiff companies are at least on a par with the performance of Bailiff companies in other authorities in London or working for other authorities in London, if not actually slightly better. So, you know, we from the information we've seen and are receiving on a regular basis, are comfortable with the performance of both companies currently. But that's something we continue to monitor.
Thank you.
Number 14, the petition asks, please can they be published on the council's website, given that the council is so open and transparent, or providing to Mr. Dishman and councillors who need to know what the policy is.
We have received documents from both Bailiff companies in terms of how they instruct their officers to deal with vulnerable individuals. Whether or not those documents are documents we could provide openly, I'm not sure. They are obviously documents that both Bailiff companies have produced, and those may have a view on whether or not they want to disclose. But we certainly have the documents to hand.
So, if I can, because technically you were asking me, not a report. If there are procedures for dealing with vulnerable people, and there are agreements with the bailiff companies as to how those vulnerable individuals will be treated in those cases, I can't see any reason why that shouldn't be included somewhere on the website.
Okay.
Might take 20 clicks to do.
Okay, nearly finished now. 15, what steps have the council put in place to ensure that bailiffs make proper inquiries of the council when a registered keeper shows them proof of payment or some other valid document as to why the VCN is not due, rather than just clamping the card and refusing to move until the payment is made?
I don't think we can count in London.
The bailiffs do.
And they clamp to an elderly lady who had paid her VCN. I think this is what it was.
Yeah, I think what I need to say on this one is that clearly this was a case where mistakes were made, and there's not been an issue in terms of NSL holding their hand up and the Bailiff company holding their hand up and admitting that they clearly made mistakes in the way they dealt with this case. And it was regrettable, the reactions that they took. It has been dealt with at a high level within NSL to ensure that procedures are tightened so that they don't end up in this situation again. We do expect them to contact us if they're not sure what to do next. And they do it on a regular basis. In this particular case, there was a mistake made, it didn't work the way it should have done. The discussions that I had with NSL in the contract meeting that followed was that we all agreed that we needed to tighten the situation up. We needed also to action it in terms of personally going around and seeing the lady concerned with personal apology. A letter was written to the lady, and they also provided us some vouchers.
16, you thank Mr. Dishman for his comments, but he says, what are you going to do about the comments, if anything at all?
Are there any plans to change the KPIs?
Well, at the moment, there isn't a KPI in relation to Bailey performance. So this is going to be more about whether or not we're considering there should be, and if we do consider it, should be, what should be included in it. So, you know, the comments that have been made there will certainly take them on board and decide whether or not that's something we think would be beneficial.
Something
17. Last one. Given that a bailiff shouldn't take a work van, tools of the trade, a mobility car, or one displaying a blue badge, which makes use of the bailiffs impotent, why isn't the council smart enough to look at what other boroughs do, of which Mr. Dishman has wide experience, rather than simply sticking to the blunt and not very effective method of using bailiffs who only collect on a quarter of the PCNs they give?
Obviously, we talk to our colleagues in other authorities on a very regular basis, and the feedback we get from our colleagues in other boroughs is that the use of bailiff is the most common way of collecting debts. I'm happy to look into other methods that other councils are using. No doubt, based on the suggestions that Mr. Bishop has made here in number 17 this question, that would incur council additional costs which wouldn't be incurred by using the component. So it's something that we clearly need to be considering as part of that consideration.
Nothing on it.
Thank you very much. A number of the issues that are raised there are relevant to the parking review, which is going up for consultation following the meeting of the Environment Committee later this week. And no doubt Mr. Dishman will pass it back to him. We'll want to respond to that consultation with some of the issues that you've raised.
As already.
As already. I didn't think consultation maybe would come out.
Yeah.
Actually, it's not better because the papers have been published, so it hasn't fallen. Okay, Chair. Councillor Metro.
Just raising the rules of
Their interest.
not an interest. Can I just ask, we don't have a forward work programme on the agenda. I was
the last committee.
The last committee, so the last meeting of the audit committee agreed the audit work programme for this year.
Right, okay. Thought we used to have that here.
Okay, can we move on then to item 5, which is the annual report of the audit committee. It's actually in my name, it's actually in my name, but it will be referred on, subject to your agreement, to full council. In fact, it's Lord Harris your Barnet, time in the office that's referred to here. Are there any questions? Stephen?
One of the items in the on page 19 of the set that's referred to is compliance with laws, regulation, internal policies and procedures.
So we're on item 5, which doesn't go as far as page 19. This is the annual report of the audit committee.
The next one.
We'll come to that in a moment. Okay. Can we agree the report and come to full council in September? Yeah. Okay. Then we'll move on to agenda item 6, the annual governance statement. Marianne.
Thank you, Chairman. The annual governance statement is a retrospective analysis of the year just gone, so 2013-14, and and this is for inclusion in the annual accounts. The annual governance statement describes the process of gathering sources of assurance during the year and reviewing those sources of assurance. As part of this review, this resulted in 6 significant governance issues monitored during 2014-15, and these are described at page 33 onwards. So on that page, we have got business continuity and resilience as one of those significant governance issues. Also embedding a new committee system, information management, roles and responsibilities of the Commissioning Council, contract management framework, and change management. All of those issues will be reviewed throughout the year and incorporated in the internal audit plan as well. So the committee are asked to comment on this and then approve it for inclusion in the accounts. And it will be signed by the leader and the chief executive.
Can I ask, on page 23, this is, I mean, it might be just in the language, this is a report looking backwards and forwards in some sense.
No, it's totally retrospective.
It's entirely, so where it talks about operational day-to-day risk management exists, it's not at some level, that's really existed.
Yeah.
Because we then mentioned lead members, and of course we don't have lead members.
No, but at the time we did.
Yeah.
So it is in relation to the system of governance that was in place last year, which was the executive, and we moved to the committee system on the 2nd of June this year.
Yeah. Okay. I'm sure there are other questions. Peter?
In relation to these range of items that are covered, one of them clearly is compliance with laws, regulation, internal policies and procedures. And clearly, as a result of the matters that we discussed at council in relation to the appointment committees, one of the issues that came up was that the council had not been compliant with that law for an extended period of time. And therefore, I wondered to what extent the review of effectiveness had contemplated that problem, or how it is possible to certify at the end that we were in compliance given the discovery of the existence of this problem for an extended period of time.
So those issues that occurred at the council are currently part of the investigation, and then therefore we will have a report from that investigation. At this stage, there has been no issue about lawfulness because those issues have been resolved at the full council meeting on the 15th of July. So in this case, this is a report up until March 2014, so it has included those issues that were relevant for last year. Any issues that result out of annual council for this year will be incorporated in next year's annual government statement.
This is where I'm confused because you talk with being up to March, and then there's a sentence here which says the new committee system went live in June 2nd.
Well, it is reflecting that it went live in the 2nd.
Yeah.
Dead short, yeah.
Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On page 32 and page 34, I was really quite surprised as a new member to find that the overarching council business continuity strategy isn't in place, and that across the council a framework to manage contracts does not exist, and instead each delivery unit develops its own approach, and as a result there's an inconsistent way of measuring benefits achieved. I was quite horrified actually reading that, to find that we've gone into huge contracts with no framework in place for managing contracts. What's going on?
Yeah, so these, I think, relate to items in particular, maybe on there for confirmation that came to the last audit committee. and they are covered actually later on in the agenda item. So in the section on follow-ups, we will be giving you a full update on the matters that led to those items being raised in this report. It will be easy to open with the points on the agenda.
Thank you, Chair. I've got two questions. One, I did notice that page 25 of the full agenda pack, that'd be page 20. There just keeps something of a consistent theme among staff. That with communication from management, particularly about change, but also page 25 about mutual effective leadership with managers who are visible, organised for their I mean, that seems to come up a lot. And it's something I've read up, I've read in the papers fairly consistently. I've subbed on this committee for 2 years. It's the first time I'm on as a full member, but this was something that was coming up a year, 2, 3 years ago. And I wonder what your I accept that there's been some quite significant changes in the senior leadership within the council, but what are you doing to improve your communication with staff? Because if you haven't got that done, it's very difficult when you get reported up.
Chris?
Well, if it's in here, it's an important matter. So we undertook a staff survey towards the end of last year. There were a number of highlights in that, but also a number of areas that are important for us to reflect on and do something about. So you are right, there were kind of a couple of key messages out of that. The first was in relation to understanding change and its impact on individuals, and then being able to locate what change means for them, and that then by extension takes you to a set of observations about the leadership of that change. And I think that those messages apply to the very top of the organisation for the strategic commissioning board, which I'm a member. It relates to our delivery directors, it relates to their management teams, and so on and so forth through the management of the organisation. So there isn't really a kind of good short answer to how we fix that. Other than to say there are a number of interventions we're making in relation to the staff survey, which strengthening our description of change is key. And I guess a key part of that is the process that we are at the end, I think, of we are out of the other end of what was the council's last change programme, which, as you know, is referred to as the One Barnet programme. That is now effectively finished, and what is being discussed through theme committees over the summer and into the autumn and then into the new year, which will ultimately get agreed in our new corporate plan and medium-term financial plan, is the council's vision for the next 4 to 5 years. And so all of our interventions over the next few months are building to the point at which we are able, in as straightforward and as clear and as transparent manner as possible, able to discuss with our workforce the implications of what that change will be for them, and to make sure that we've got the right architecture in place to do that. So the reason why we're taking it so seriously is part of the reason why it's in this report. Now, just switch off, so I don't make any jokes about that. I'm sure I can turn it back on. Yes, I can turn it back on. Actually, the response to the staff survey is on the council's intranet site. You can have a look at it there, as is the sort of management response to that. So if you want to look in more detail, councillor, you can do so. Really like that.
I can't because nothing's working.
I've got mine here.
I'll borrow yours then. Well, it's reassuring to hear that. But I'll just make a comment about it. Personally, I think that, forget the horse has bolted. The horse is halfway across the counter. A lot of these changes are frankly too late. I've never known morale amongst council staff to be as poor as it is at the moment, and a large part of that was frankly a complete failure to communicate with them, listen to them, and take on board their concerns when this change programme happened. Rant over. Actually, no, it's not, because that leads into my second question. Page 23. Again, going back 2 years, I used to complain about the council's attitude to data transparency, and particularly the attitude to freedom of information requests. Things have slightly improved in that time. I think, Mr. Naylor, you have been quite a significant part of that. I don't know what goes on behind the scenes, but particularly since you've been...
Lots of things we keep secret.
Can you say that again? I can look at the camera.
But I think there has been some improvement. Personally, one of the things I've raised is I think the council is still very, and I think it is a corporate governance issue. The council is still very, very poor at taking on resident concerns in a number of areas. I've been working with a resident who's concerned about Church Farmhouse Museum, and I have to say the processes for getting answers out about that have been, obscure, and nothing about that process has been transparent. The resident doesn't feel they get any answers out of that at all. Some residents have complained to me about the fact that, again, it's not necessarily an audit question, but it is about transparency and the attitude of the council in corporate governance. Expanding the number of planning complaints before a council committee to 5, and that doesn't. I suppose these are not the actions of the council that's committed to listening to resident concerns and things like that. And when push has come to shove on some of the big questions that residents have asked about, like Church Farmhouse Museum, the council tends to shut its doors and doesn't really answer the questions.
I'm not quite sure where that fits with the audit programme. I find things far more open, to be honest, and they were at different times in the past. One of the problems with all of this is that the answer is given, it's there on the website. It may be there on the website. The website's very good for looking for information, but unless you know that it's there, you're not going to find it. And that's a common problem that I have with all sorts of information. And part of it's going here about public consultations, and things go out to public consultations that you don't even know about. But hopefully that will improve, because I've been assured by the Chief Executive, for instance, that all public consultations that go out now have to be approved by committees. So officers can't just do them on their own. Okay. David.
I was going to ask a similar question to Councillor Richardson.
Any others?
Page 35, which I retained the report, which is section 6 certification. It refers to section 5. Is section 5 the entirety of the annual governance statement? Is that what it is that's being certified?
So the entire annual governance statement is signed off by the leader and the chief exec. What is section 5 is the significant governance issues. So everything's been operating effectively except for those issues, those 6 issues during the year that are considered significant governance issues.
So those are the issues that are identified as governance issues for 2014-15 as the key improvements.
Sorry, to monitor during 2014-15. So So it says, it describes the governance issues identified during this review period 13-14 to carry forward for monitoring within 2014-15.
They will be.
But it doesn't actually say section 5 at the start of the report, or anywhere, it just says section 6. There's no heading for this itself.
The heading might have come off, but I will make sure that the leader signs the version of the section.
Which page does the word section 5 actually appear on?
It should start from page 29, 32 onwards.
That's the part which is head of governance issues for 2014. Yeah, that makes sense. But it's just missing the word section.
I'll amend that for the leader.
Last 14. Okay, is everyone happy, having considered the report to recommend its adoption to include within the statement of accounts, effectively asking the leader to sign it? Yes? No dissenting voices?
Great.
Great. Okay, we move on to item 7, which is the external auditor's report. We've got a number of supplementary papers which have been laid around. I'm going to be very honest here and say that I missed the link because my papers were black and white rather than being highlighted in blue, because I know it is the people who use iPads. So I did, when I got home at midnight last night, go and look at it, having been reading the papers all evening. And I'm not sure what I would have done had I found a 119-page report as an appendix to read in that sort of way. So we've got that. Which officers are going to talk to?
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, I realise I should have declared an interest. I'm the governor of Cumberland for School and Private Property School.
Well, I think most of us are governors of all sorts of schools. And I think that's recorded in the, we're going to record every school governance, every time the report like this comes up.
It's just good practice to declare it, when you realise that you have an interest.
We were told not to declare it.
Sorry?
We were told specifically not to declare it because I was declaring mine.
So I haven't told anyone else.
This is what we were told by committee, and that's why I stopped doing it.
Okay. It's up to you whether you do it or not.
Yeah, I can do it, I'm just letting you know what happened in the previous committee.
Is this because they're named schools that were actually audited during the year?
Yeah.
Because in fact the audit process can call on any school at any time. So in theory, any school or any organisation that any of us are involved in could in that way.
It's on the register of interest anyway, on the website, so it's declared from day one.
Yeah, it's voluntary.
I don't mind, I just need to know whether we need to.
If you want to declare that's fine. None of the schools that I'm involved in are listed on that page, on page 43. Arjun, are you involved in one?
Yeah, Brian Barnet School. Yeah, school government.
Right.
Oh,
So that's a pensions fund thing, what is it? Which one are we looking at?
Well, the one that was raised was specifically the list of schools there, the scheduled bodies.
Yeah, that's what the pension fund.
Yeah,
Not
so
sure
that's
what
what
it
the
is.
pension fund. Yeah, well, all that stuff, right. Okay, so there's
Well, I declare my interest, Dulwich Junior
there's
Corporate.
another record in that ordinance of school.
Dulwich Junior Corporate.
Right. Have we all got all the other bits of paper that have been circulated? Apart from that one, the audited accounts, the auditor's report, which is an opinion, and the audit findings on the pension fund. Okay. Chris, you want to say a few words?
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. So presenting to you this evening the audited financial statements, recognising this is an important part of our governance cycle for the year. And I guess our final accounts don't quite have the same sort of moment of truth that a publicly listed company might do, so our share prices are unlikely to plummet or rise as a result of the publication this evening, but they are an important part of our financial management cycle, which starts, I guess, with the publication of our budget and medium-term financial plan each year, our corporate plan, when we monitor that plan during the course of the year, quarterly in public, and then when we receive the year-end position, which we did just a few weeks ago at the normal meeting of the Performance and Contracts Committee. And I guess if nothing else, what these accounts do is demonstrate to you, to the public, to me and my fellow officers that the core ingredients of that medium-term financial plan and of our budget are materially accurate. And so if I was to draw you anywhere, I guess, within what is a substantial and at times slightly baffling set of documents, I draw your attention to the reported underspend at the end of the year, which concurs with what we reported to the Performance and Contracts Committee a few weeks ago, that we have delivered the financial year in line with the expectations of the medium-term financial plan, particularly in relation to our year-end reserves position. And noting, of course, that during the course of 2012-13, the Council needs to deliver some £14.5 million worth of savings. Evidently that has been achieved as noted in these accounts. Just to put that into some context for a moment, so since 2010, we delivered getting on 40 million of savings and another 30 or so to come over the next 2 years, and as we reported to the Policy and Resources Committee at the start of June, another 70 or so million of savings to take place towards the end of the decade. So just to put that in some simple language, I guess, we are about a third of the way through the journey that we think we need to make before 2019-20. A couple of other observations I'd like to make, Chair, if I may, before I hand over to colleagues from Grant Thornton. First is that we were the second council in London to close our accounts this year, and to do so, noting the auditor's report in order to without any material errors. That, for those of you familiar with local authority account closure processes, is a reasonably unheard of outcome. For those of you who are competitive, the council who got their accounts closed first did so 2 days before we did, but with 14 material errors in their financial statement. So, if nothing else, I would like to just record my thanks to the finance team who closed the accounts, and in particular to Paul Thurgood on my left, Vicky Morris, and to Ian Miller, who's sat down there at the moment, but in a moment turns around to come and sit up, just in case there are any questions in relation to for Ian. But also to our auditors who have worked both diligently and swiftly. Final point, Chair, is that, of course, we achieved this audit and closure this year in what was a tumultuous year for the finance service. So it transferred to Capita in September. Now, the closure process was run by CSG. During that time, a new management team was recruited by CSG to deliver the finance service. There were good joined as part of that process. The new finance system was implemented at the end of the year, and of course there were very significant savings within that contract that needed to be achieved, which meant a lot of change for the finance services, indeed a number of the services that transferred. So, in all of that context, I think these both in terms of outcome and process, is all we can be pleased with tonight, and I would like to personally say thank you to all involved in that process.
Yes, thank you. I'm sure members would want to be associated with that. So, thanks. It's not been an easy year. I think those of us who've been around for a long time would appreciate that. And to have got this out in this way with the auditors being so happy. I think is very good news for the authority. Who wants?
Auditors so happy. It's the face of happy auditors.
Yeah. There's a joke this which of you wants to have a few words? Nick, one. Nick.
I'm happy to introduce the report. Thank you, Chair. To introduce the report quickly and then obviously to take any questions at the end. The executive summary is on page 77 of your pack. At the time of writing the report, clearly we were still completing some of the main audit work. So there's a few bullet points there in terms of outstanding things. Essentially, just to update that now, we still just need to complete the finalise our internal review process, but the major testing has been completed out of the way, and in line with the original timetable we were anticipating end of July sign-off. As Chris has mentioned, we haven't identified any adjustments to the reported financial position, and over the page on page 78 we've just highlighted a couple of key messages that have come out of the audit, none of which is creating any element. We've also provided a draft audit opinion which came around with the accounts. That's unqualified and unmodified. The one point just to note at the bottom of that opinion is you'll see there's a certificate which means we cannot certify the accounts audit as complete until we've completed both our review of the whole of government accounts, which is reliant on guidance and requirements which have not yet been provided to us as auditors. The pack has been completed by the council, but we can't audit it until we have the guidance we're required to audit it against. And also we are required to consider the objection which we've just received, an alleged objection which we've just received. So we'll consider that part of the certification and closure process. Just moving through the report to page 82. At this point in the report, we put our findings against significant risks and then 1 in 3 against other risks. So this all aligns with our audit plan, which we presented to the committee back in April. We've reported against each of the areas that we looked at, and I think just to summarise, there's no significant issues from that work that I need to draw to your attention. Carrying on through, the second area of our work is the value for money opinion. Here we've completed again the work as we identified in our audit plan. From that, there's no significant issues that we've identified, and actually the accounts opinion is an unqualified opinion that we're proposing to provide for that. Again, there's some detail included in the report on the findings and the work we've done. I won't sort of take you through that in any detail, but if there are any questions on the content, we're happy to take those. The final point I just wanted to raise before I hand over for questions is Appendix C on page 110, which is the letter of representation. This is a standard letter of representation that we will require to be signed alongside the accounts in case the committee has got any issues with anything that's included within that. Just to close, I'd just like to thank the Council and the Finance team for all their help in completing the audit to us to set an early time scale, and then to invite any questions from members.
My thanks to council staff, of course, extends to yourselves as well, because if the auditors and the council officers aren't working well together, or we can't achieve getting accounts signed off in a timely way, we clearly can. Questions on the accounts, Peter?
On the accounts, there is at the beginning, I'm beginning to question the numbers. There's something called the explanatory forward, which I assume is an attempt to help people understand the material which occurs thereafter. I just have a couple of questions about that. On page 2, where you've got the two tables, the first one I think very clearly makes the point that was made before.
On page 2.
Yes. That the actual expenditure was extremely close to budget and very well controlled. The table below that shows an improvement in something of about £74 million. And looking through the rest of the accounts, it's clear that the cash balance was significantly improved during the year. The reserves, the usable reserves as opposed to the unusable reserves went up by about £50 million. And I just wondered whether, in terms of explaining what the benefit of that was, or whether there was no benefit at all, it might merit just a few words, given these are very large numbers relative to the accounts.
So effectively, the two numbers that you referred to, the first one that Chris referred to earlier was the one that was represented to the Performance and Contract Management Committee a few weeks back, reported £120,000 underspend within the council. Obviously, as Chris did say earlier, there is a note further on in the accounts that does explain how we moved from that report position to members into how it was then reflected into the accounts itself. So I draw your attention to note 29 that starts on page 49 of this document, and that effectively goes through a series of adjustments of how we come from that 120,000 underspend that we report to members. All the accounting adjustments that do go through in terms of various internal group charges, adjustments that we make in respect to the pension fund within our accounts and capital charges. And in effect, we do end up with that summary table at the bottom. So it would be normal practice to put that table within that document. Obviously, just gives that further breakdown as to what's in note 29, as to how you move from one position to another. But I would say that the note 29 starts on page 49 through to page 52 does go through all the breakdown as to how we get from one table to the other. And that's just the summary document coming through. A few words I can use.
I'm not suggesting that the numbers are wrong in any sense at all. What I'm suggesting is that if they are sufficiently important to put in the explanatory forward, and if there is something like an £80 million difference between the 2 years, whereas we think it's important to refer to the £120,000 difference between the budget and the actual, but we don't think it's worth explaining to people what an £80 million difference means in the comprehensive income and expenditure. And what I'm suggesting is that if this is an explanatory forward, which is intended to help people understand the accounts, it seems to me that it is 100 times more significant to explain what the difference between the 58 million and the minus 24 million is than between the 292,972 and the 292,864. If we are trying to focus on transparency, because I'm not sure that I understand whether the 58 million is good news or bad news. It feels from all the other numbers to be actually quite good news, but it would be interesting just to get a brief comment on that.
The adjustments within that note are adjustments, as it says, adjustments required by statute or reporting standards. I mean, in terms of an explanation, I suppose the council could add an additional narrative underneath that to explain what the key movements are. You can see from the numbers above what some of the major movements are. So, for example, you've got your revaluation on non-current assets, which is a significant movement year on year in that. Then your gains and losses on the pension fund show two of the most significant movements. So they're sort of taken out of, as effectively, they're taken out of the main numbers as they're almost outside of the council's control. I mean, that is a standard documentation that we see in all accounts.
The key point though is, and it's the one we're making, which is if this is the explanatory forward, you should explain. I don't think we can't be happy with that.
I think that's their comment. Perhaps it needs another note added.
I think we can change it, Chair. This is sure. So my explanatory forward, so we can change that.
Yeah, of that 58 million, there's 67 million was actually to do with the pension fund.
There's a reversal of 70, there's all sorts
No,
of things going on.
I understand that. The general public wouldn't stand a chance in hell of understanding.
The second question I have is on, again, on the explanatory forward on page 4, which is, you've got a nice table showing what the council owns and what the council owes. And within the table of what the council owns, you've got 3% of cash and cash equivalents. Now, that's slightly odd. I mean, maybe it's just the classification and you meant overdrafts, but it's very odd that you would owe cash and cash equivalents, which would normally be an asset, not a liability.
Sure, someone's going to
That's right, and that's
Chair, I'm Ian Dunn, Head of Treasury. The Council's cash position, its net position, is not overdrawn on a day-by-day basis, but there are school balances which with money was so when you present the accounts at year end, you do end up showing an overdraft position, but the net position of the Council is that it is in cash surplus.
So just to be clear, again, as this is the explanatory forward rather than it might be easier for people to understand if that box was called overdrafts or short-term borrowings or something, because I think that's what you just said it is. Yeah, I think that's a fair point.
Okay. We go down the table. James.
Thank you. Can I associate myself with Councillor Zinkin just said very much. First of all, congratulations on putting this together. In the way that you said, you're very, very efficient indeed. And I would say congratulations on the outcomes. Any fair-minded person looking at the top of page 2 would have to say that our budgetary control this year is excellent. I entirely agree that this needs to be, this business of the explanatory forward needs to be thought through. Perhaps for this year some things could be added, but I think as an ongoing project it would be very worthwhile putting in time and effort to look at considerably expanding and developing that whole part of it. What Councillor Zinkin was basically saying is, look, one of the things that I think came up in the discussion was, which wasn't understood perhaps, was we don't just need to know, are these numbers accurate? We believe them to be accurate. We're totally convinced of that. Is that a good thing, a bad thing, or a meaningless thing? And that's a subjective judgment, and that doesn't have to be a particularly political thing, but it requires some sort of narrative, discursive, qualitative thing. And it's not the place for that is right here, and that has not been done by and large. And when you have an annual report for a company, that is exactly the purpose of the statement of the chief executive, CFO, etc. Now, a lot of companies that turns into just standard boilerplate, and but the idea is to provide that precise kind of, well, you and I own this company, and here's what's actually going on in these numbers. And you can look at later on and see if that's really a reasonable way of representing it. I'm not sure all the data, but I mean, if you were to say that this document is the most important document that we produce as a council, for us as members on this committee and for the whole of the council to understand, and yet it is very hard to understand. Well, some of that is it just has to be hard to understand because that's the law of how you set these things out. But the front part of the book doesn't have to be hard to understand at all. And I think it would deserve work. I think that also the visual display here is really mediocre. We shouldn't be seeing pie charts made into 3D things flipped on their side and then turned into percentages. So if you look at the pie chart on the top of page 3, you've got a sort of lilac blob that's 1% and a crimson blob on the right hand side that's 6%, and the 1% thing actually visually looks larger than the 6%, and that's just the sort of distorted result you get when you do this kind of thing. You want a bar chart for that, and you want numbers as well as percentages, and then you can actually get some sort of visual representation of the numbers that are in the book. Stuff like that, I think, is really worth thinking through, because this is how this is how we as representatives of the public and the public as well can actually get to grips with how we're performing as a council. And personally, I think it's very important because this is such a positive message. At least in terms of the budget control, there's a very clear positive message, I think it's really worth having that made clear.
Thank you for that. We'll work on now. Let me just say, we've just had 2 of our new members, and it's always interesting to have new faces around the place, adding something new to things that probably people who've been around too long take for granted. But that's cool. Let's work on that and we'll come back. Sorry.
Sorry, I feel good now. 2 points. One, it's on page 79.
So you want 79 of
Oh, okay. Just a minute. Okay.
79.
Yeah, about that.
Right. 79.
Yeah, you can't. The letter said, state communications are for the performance technical that the traffic use response along the stairs against the backdrop of change, etc. And then it goes on to say management must continue to focus on maintaining the control rate. There's a number of systems undergo further changes. Now that's been one of our worries from previous committees as well, with all this change happening. Where and how and when do we get the assurance this is happening? Do we get it during this current session? Do we wait till the end of the year before it all goes wrong, or before it all goes well? How do I know? Do I have to wait 12 months? Second point, mine on page 108. I think you've got a time to
We'll
read down
do
the
the first one first.
Okay.
No.
Thank you, Chair. So just to reassure you that as part of the 14-15 internal audit plan, we've got resource in there to look at the key financial systems which are the, I think that's the key changes that departments are referring to. So we'll be auditing them as we would have in the end of the year.
No, so the point I'm making is, I understand that from past experience. You will produce a report every quarterly to this committee.
Yes.
Would that be included in that? That's what I'm trying to understand.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. There's a title on page 108, item 3.
So this is some sort of interaction between the pension fund and the general fund. It's 10 million this past year and 28 million previously. Can we have some explanation as to how those numbers arise?
Pension fund and general fund benefits, as I understand.
2 now? These are reflections of accounting adjustments suggested we made annually and released by the actuary to reflect assets and liabilities of the pension fund. There will be movements between years depending on the market value of the pension fund and actuarial assumptions on future cash flows towards the pension fund.
Do I understand it then that these monies are going out of the general fund in order to ensure that the pension fund can cover its liabilities? Is what's happening?
It's a snapshot of the liabilities of the pension fund at one point in time, and these will change over time.
Certainly from my experience, Chair, there have been occasions in the past when we've gone 7 years with a holiday for making contributions into the pension fund. I'm going back a few years. Is that right?
That was a considerable number of years ago, and the regulations governing management of pension funds have changed to prevent that happening again.
Perhaps it's a terminology. It's talking about gains and losses rather than contributions to pay out pensions. So, I mean, is this something to do with the performance of the stock market? Is it something to do with what the actuary says the council needs to do to cover the liabilities, or what is it?
Can we take that point away and clarify for me? You said it clarified the pension fund as well, so next week.
Yeah. I think that makes sense. Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, I'm at a disadvantage, Mr Chairman, because I've not been able to receive my emails, councillor emails for some time, so I didn't get this by email. And the business continuity rather fell apart yesterday and today because of the cut in the power at the London Business Park, so I couldn't get my laptop back and or my iPad back. So this is the first time I've seen it.
Okay, if you do have any questions that you want to ask afterwards,
I just thought the business continuity point which I'm going to
don't hesitate. Well, when you go home and take that, isn't this 115 odd pages? If you've got any questions on them, do feel free to ask them in offices. Arjun?
Well, can I suggest that these kind of pages are made available to us as early as possible?
Well,
Can I ask a really boring question about page 17, about the heritage assets? You don't hold some of the heritage assets on balance sheet because of cost information, etc. Do you have a list of what those assets are, and do you justify to the auditors why, I mean, apart from the reason given here, but why those particular heritage assets you can't get a valuation for? And do you have any examples? Because I can't think of what we, apart from what former no description councillor Coleman calls a civic tax in the other room, which are the former mayor or Shanta. I really don't know what other heritage assets we've got.
I think the heritage assets and accounting policy that we have adopted is in line with previous years. We can also provide to the committee a breakdown of what heritage assets we do have in our accounts and the further register that we have got of assets that we don't include. As part of preparing the statements, then the accountants do make a decision with the various values that we do have for about heritage assets as to whether there are material movements in their value or whether some of the facts are invaluable and therefore can't be released to the accounts. And as part of that review, we take place with grant performance as the audit. I'm happy to circulate the list of what's in it that isn't included throughout as far as we're aware.
Hang on a second. I'm not sure that I understood the answer to that, because I'm not sure what qualifies as a heritage asset. Arjun's question was, can you give us some examples of what a heritage asset? I sit on a trust which has 35 almshouses, some of which are 400 years old, which are in the books at nil value because they can't be sold. Are we talking about stuff like that, or what?
No, as far as I believe, to what I expect in this area, our property itself is included within our fixed assets as we've gone through around the property. These are the assets like the mayoral chains and other items that will be held in this building.
We don't own the mayoral chains though. Why are they on our balance sheet?
Oh, okay. They're not significant list here. Well, if you could circulate a list of them.
Fair enough to think, I would say. Moving on, I did just want to, can I pick up a point? Sorry.
I'll come back.
Unless you want to
I was going to say something about heritage assets. I mean, every local authority has a vast amount of heritage assets. If you were asked to go into your basement, I don't know if you've got one, you'll find all sorts of heritage assets that are incapable of
valuation, but are absolutely priceless. They're paintings from 1763, 1642, they're covered in dust. It's very difficult to value them, and they're the sort of things that come in the category of heritage assets. They won't be properties normally valued at some sort of rebuild or market cost, even if it's a guild or market heritage. These will be a great variety of things that you've accumulated over the last 500 years.
Actually, let me tell you a story. The first duty of every mayor after they've been elected is to go and visit the mortuary, because it's at the mortuary that all that stuff is kept, and the mayor will then decide which bits he wants to have in the parlour during his mayoral year.
So many jokes on today. I could do that. He's Councillor Zachary, he's the former stand-up comedian. I could roll up a few.
I know, I've seen it before, it's very funny.
I'll tell you said that. Turning, well, I said that to him on a number of occasions as well. Turning on to our main agenda, page 101, I just want to pick up at something that Mr. Dishman raised in his public questions, which was about the contract that NSL had with their bailiffs. I was surprised that we don't keep copies of contracts that contracted partners.
Third-party contracts.
Yes, that a bit late for me. Third-party contracts. Well past it. I'm surprised we don't keep copies of those, because they do relate to business that affects our residents. And so, what is that normal? I mean,
your mic's off. It's in camera. It's in camera.
Is it normal to keep third-party contracts?
These are contracts that people we contract with, who they contract with.
Yes.
I wouldn't normally expect that we would retain copies of contracts that our contractors enter into.
Well, even though those relate to, that really does surprise me actually, because given some of the stuff that we raise, as an aside, we've done stuff on paying living wage to people, and surely if we don't have that, we don't have sight of the contracts.
We've not applied living wage in our third-party supply chain. We've applied it to directly employed staff only.
Yes, but that is potentially that could be a decision that could be taken later on. But we wouldn't have that level of information. I have to say I'm quite surprised by that.
But if we ask our supply chain to enforce the living wage in their contracts, in their contract, it's quite a complex
I just use that as an example. As an example, somewhere where council policy is effective further down as a project. As I said, I'm surprised we don't keep copies of those contracts just to see. Isn't there? I don't want to make an allegation for it, but isn't there the possibility something might crop up if we don't have copies of their contracts?
I'm not surprised we don't keep the original.
I'd just say that it's a matter of commercial confidentiality for some parts, and anything else the people you contract with won't want to tell you necessarily what's in the contracts they've got with the people that are going to supply to them, that they're going to supply to you. And it's usual not to have those, but you would usually, I'm sure you have, bind them into the important conditions within your main contract, which then will reflect into the subcontract. And in case of enforcement agents anyway, then registered enforcement agents will be governed very shortly by a very detailed set of Ministry of Justice regulations, which actually will change the way they operate and to reflect really the way that you can operate with them. So I think you tie them up in another way, but I wouldn't expect any council to know subcontract terms and conditions. For that reason, it's commercially confidential.
We may want to know that there's difference to policy of keeping, for the reasons you outlined, our contractors' contract.
In fact, given the number of people we can contract with, the majority of whom will probably be subcontracting parts of it. Maybe just have a look at the building industry and the amount of building work that's being done on the council's behalf, right the way across the council. If we had copies of every subcontract that the building contracts worked into, we'd have a whole army of people charged because at the council taxpayers' expense, just monitoring those subcontracts, which isn't cost effective. Anyway,
I understand the cost. I do think it's important that we know who's working on behalf of the council, because otherwise we have got exactly the problem that this edition raised about the bailiffs contracted by NSF.
Yeah, I think that there is an argument that where someone is effectively directly representing the council, as opposed to a blanket, because in one of Mr. Bishman's questions about the reputation of the council being at stake, and then we might want to have a greater look at the way in which they're working. But as a generality, I don't think that's feasible.
But in your main contract, you were going to say that you have the right to approve the appointment, which means you do your due diligence on what sort of people they were appointing as subcontractors, without necessarily knowing the detail of the subcontract, and that would be the usual basis for doing these things.
And we do have the bad kick-outs if they screw up, as clearly happened in one case. Richard, do you have any other questions?
I've just got one very minor question, which I'm sure will trouble nobody, but it's troubled me slightly, and that's on the audited accounts, this document. And it's page 42, and it's really notes 19 and 22 on page 43. I just wondered if somebody could explain to me the increase in debtors of almost 50% between 12, 13, 13 and 14. And there's two things to say about that. One, in the accounts it says they've been restated, but I think that's irrelevant. Just to tell you that I don't accept that's an answer, because I think that's irrelevant. And the second point, it says that the retrospective effect is to increase debtors matched by compensating adjustments to creditors. Well, my maths has never been very good, but the creditors go up by 7 million and the debtors go up by 47 million. And I wonder how compensating that is.
Someone like to answer that?
I'll try. Obviously, at the beginning of the last financial year, there was a change in non-domestic rates in terms of reporting between central government and local authority. In the sense of we are responsible for the protection of that debt as we always have been, but we also carry the risk of the non-collection in terms of NNDR changes. That does account for the change within both the debtors balance and the creditors balance, because there are final adjustments made at year end as we go through the collection funds, how we are operating on behalf of central government around that. So also we have restated the 12-13 figures accordingly in comparison to last year for both 19 and 22. But it is predominantly around the non-domestic rates change in legislation.
I would have said that the non-domestic rate change may well be payments in advance figure, 1.9 to 30 million, giving you the benefit of the doubt. But I'm not entirely sure. What about the 67 to 81 for bodies expelled to central government? It just seems like a very large increase in debtors without explanation. And I think somewhere you ought to actually explain in words that people can understand why it is that you are owed so much money at the end of the year when you weren't the year before, even if it's a manufactured figure that you thought up during the accounts. It ought to explain things. It's glaringly different when you look at the numbers.
Sorry, to clarify, so the change in NDR is specifically in relation to the body's external, the body's external central government. The payment in advance point, significant increase is in relation to the accounting of the CSG contracts, and they'll be agreed with the auditors as part of the closure process.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I've got a point of procedure for you. As an independent member, the first I saw these accounts was when I turned up here this evening. And with the best will in the world, I can't speed read 116 pages. Richard is clearly better than I am. You do have a title on page 4, syndicate spell investment.
I've already pointed that out.
My question is, what's the committee being asked to do? Actually approve or oversee these accounts, or just completely rely on management representation in the work around Thornton? Because I feel that if the committee is being asked to approve the accounts, that I personally can't do that because I haven't read them, I haven't seen them. Seen the reports.
I have a lot of sympathy with
Just for a clarification.
technically we're being asked to approve.
Well, I don't think you can.
So just to clarify, if the audit committee are being asked to approve, to give the chairman and Mr. Major as the section 151 officer approval to approve the accounts. In terms of the process that needs to go through already, just to clarify, so on the 31st of May, the publication of the accounts was made public, and we started our inspection of the accounts period, in which case the accounts were published on the council's website, and allowed anyone within the realising our requirement to raise any questions in relation to that. And we have a number of questions in from the public that the finance team have been resolving through that process. I would believe at that time that was shared with members at the same time that we have published them and were available. Obviously, when the papers were published, there was a link in there to the main statements itself. I also believe when the audit committee attended some training 2 weeks ago, we also circulated the further link, or it should have been circulated to reminding us of the committee that they have been published at that point in time. I believe that went to the members of the committee.
So is the issue here that there was a link, I'm looking now to put it to colleagues, so when the papers were dispatched, there was a link to the accounts, and the actual accounts are included in the pack?
No, the accounts weren't included in these facts. There
There's
was
a
a
link
link to the draft of the accounts. And the final accounts we've been given received. Am I right? Is that right?
And there's not much use in a link on a piece of paper. I mean, if you're sending people a pack of paper and somewhere in it there's a web link, it's not in any way obvious that you're supposed to go to your computer, pull up the Word version of the document, click on the link, and then find it. It should only be in the pack, or
Because
it's not a meeting.
Mr. Chairman, I've got a similar issue because of problems with council email, and this is the first time I've seen these.
One of the consequences if we don't, it's not that we're not approving them, it's we're just deferring approval until we've actually had a chance to read them.
Next meeting is November.
We have to reconvene and meet with the committee, so
Yeah.
it has to be approved before us at the end of September.
Sorry,
Yeah, when we had the audit committee training, after that, the link to the draft accounts was circulated to all members, as requested at the training, Chairman.
Yeah.
Excuse me, it wasn't circulated to me. Because we're independent members on the council's circulation list.
So it was circulated to all members.
Was it clear was it actually made clear in that circulation list that you were supposed to actually look at those and it would be discussed at this meeting? Because I have a huge amount of things to read, and unless it's specified, I need to read them.
So I missed it too. Maybe we might have to
Have another meeting then.
We have a choice. We have to sign them by the end of September.
I think council's planning to sign by the end of this month. The end of September is the statutory deadline. The committee needs to approve the accounts so that the section 151 can sign the accounts. So that process has to go through.
So the committee can approve them pending any questions from the audit committee, and then if there are no questions,
I was going to suggest that we approve them in principle, and we've asked people to send in their questions. You have a right then to have a special meeting if the questions are so
And the
fundamental,
chairman,
but
and the chairman.
subject to people being satisfied with the
I
questions.
think that's quite sensible. If people aren't happy with the answers they get to the questions they raise, then they can come back to me and I will call a special meeting, which will be before, at the beginning of September, so that if anyone should happen to want to refer it up to full council, they can, that way in time, it can still be done.
I think they want to be signed by the end of, in the next couple of weeks.
I mean, ultimately, from our viewpoint, we have to decide by the end of September, so it's, we can sign by the end of the month, which is the council's internal deadline, then we need to have that approval by then. So it's up, ultimately up to the council. It's only a statutory commitment, it's given to September the 30th deadline.
I have no issues in reading these accounts over the next couple of days and providing the committee with any comments that I have. I'm sure that there won't be any, but the process has to be followed.
Sure. Arjun?
Thank you, Chair. Well, that doesn't qualify me at all, to be perfectly honest. I mean, why do we bother calling it approving this? This is a rather stamping exercise more than anything else. It seems like we've been told that if you don't approve this, the apocalypse is on its way, whatever. But we're not doing our job if we just say, well, okay, this is fine unless we've got some questions. We're not happy with it. We just shouldn't approve them. And if we have to convene another meeting, so be it. But it's not acceptable to me that members of the committee don't get sight of the papers. We don't have a chance to go through this in the level of detail that I think members of the public would expect us to. Frankly, that most members of the committee are paid to. And then, just for God's sake, if you've got some questions afterwards, let's just ask. You can't do democratic decision making like that. And this ties exactly to what I said earlier on about transparent decision making. This should be a fairly open and shut case. We haven't had time or fair sight of these papers to agree to something we haven't had a proper chance to scrutinise. I think it's not transparent. It's not right.
So through you, Chairman, page 38 talks about the answer to 60 report and also refers quite clearly to where the accounts can be found to be scrutinised. Also, the committee had training on the 1st of July, so it was quite a long time ago. So in that time, there may have been IT issues, but I don't think that would have prevented the audit committee from reviewing those accounts during that time.
I'm sorry, I've not had access to my emails throughout that whole period.
Those people who don't have access to their emails should be able to download the files from mod.gov, where they should be listed clearly for each meeting. This file wasn't.
This one wasn't. It wasn't.
I've also just, Councillor Levine should be able to go onto mod.gov, which should be either one of the document PDFs that was to be downloaded, or should be contained within one of the PDFs to be downloaded. Because that's the same practice that we follow in every committee. And the members of the public, I don't know how members of the public can easily get to this. Now, I've just checked my own email trail. As it happens, I specifically asked about the accounts process at the meeting. I sent you a follow-up email. I asked for a copy of those accounts. He said, yes, thank you very much. He passed it on to a colleague, and your colleague sent me the link to this document to me. I don't see a record. I'm not saying it didn't happen, but I don't see a record in my email trail, and I don't delete emails of any such email sent to the committee as a whole.
What said that the training? The information was sent also the work program.
Excuse me, but I'm afraid that is not consistent with the email that I have here, which is from yourself, and it's audit briefing slides. It has the member training and presentation, the work program, and the audit committee terms of reference. It does not include the draft accounts, I'm afraid.
I mean, something has clearly gone wrong here. Members of the committee feel they have not had access to the accounts at the time of the meeting. we will need to go back and look at our processes. The bit that I find particularly troubling is that they've been on our website since May. There's been public notification about their existence. We've had, as exemplified at the start of the meeting, a number of public questions related to the accounts. We've had members of the public come in and view the accounts and view supporting documentation. And I think it's disappointing in hindsight that the full pack was not sent as a PDF. That really would have helped. But
so it wasn't sent to us as a PDF to include within the account, within the papers of the committee. So the report that was given to governance was the report that was included tonight with the link that was approved by us.
I don't think I have to add, it comes back to what I was saying earlier, Chris, about stuff being on the website. Unless you're actually looking for it, you wouldn't go looking for it. I, for one, didn't know I was going to be on this committee until June the 1st. I think it was June the 1st. When was the annual meeting? June the 2nd.
Who can forget?
And certainly wasn't going looking for things in the middle of May, when frankly most of us had other things on our mind, like getting elected. I'm very conscious that members have not had the time to read this. To be honest, I'm happy to defer a decision on it. It will mean that we will have to call a special meeting probably in the latter half of August, because I'm away for the first 2 weeks of August. I will have to check with people's diaries. I would urge all members, if they have any questions or queries on the accounts, to write to any of the officers or the appropriate officers with those questions. Copy them to me, please, and they will copy the answers to me, so that when we do come to meet to approve the accounts, we aren't going to have to go through every line of it at that time. So can we we will defer it, we'll have to come back to a special meeting. But officers, I do say this, particularly with long and complicated reports like this, if they're able to be circulated to members ahead of the rest of the papers going out, it improves our performance as members, because we've had a chance to study them.
Take a vote. Take a vote.
I know, I appreciate it, that's not always going to be possible. Sorry.
Are you referring to all of agenda item 7, like
Yeah.
one's part?
Well, it all goes together.
I expected that, I'm just confirming it.
Yeah, it all goes together. Do you not have to vote?
To vote.
Do you take a vote on it? Yeah? Okay, those in favour of deferring? That's everybody.
I'm not.
Oh, sorry, you're not.
My preference would be a more elegant solution where you see what comments actually come from people, because if it's nothing material, we should be able to approve the comments.
That's I think would be difficult. But someone's got to make a decision as to someone wants to raise an objection to an thing as to whether that's significant or not.
I'm always prepared to be proved wrong, but in 30 years of doing this, I have to say that I can't ever remember there being a change to the accounts once we got to this stage. And I'm taking implicitly the word of the officers and the auditors to the point of, and not absolutely, obviously, and there may well be questions about individual items, but I really doubt whether they'll make a fundamental change to the face of the accounts at this point in time, and that's the reason why. I'm not keen to defer, but I am keen to give people the opportunity to raise their questions and have them dealt with.
Richard, I understand that. I don't think I can ever remember people getting the accounts, members getting the accounts changed. They might get odd words and explanations changed.
Yes.
But not the fundamentals of the accounts changed. Having said that, I think the point still has to be made that members do have to have the opportunity to read and hopefully to understand the accounts before they're actually approved. Okay. I want to make one other comment on the paper we've got here, which relates back in some ways to the pie chart on page 3 of the accounts, which relates specifically to the question of income. It's been a concern of mine for a number of years that we're very good at auditing expenditure. I'm not so sure that we actually manage to audit income. I'm not talking about council tax and business rates and that sort of stuff. Very easy. That's very easy. There are significant amounts of money made available by government for all sorts of projects, some of which the council will be invited to bid for, some of which we will get a share of. I, as a member, have no idea and can't monitor all of those government announcements as to what's available. And realistically have no way of knowing whether we have actually bid for that money, whether we've got money out of that announcement, or how it's been, well, how it's been spent. If we've got it, will be shown in the accounts. But the council will receive regular announcements from government inviting expressions of interest in doing bits of work that come with additional monies. And the decisions as to whether or not we bid for that money are not always taken by members. And I would like to find some way of actually monitoring that source of money. Now, I don't know how other authorities do it, if at all. I don't know.
Chair, I think there's two points I think with this. I mean, one, obviously you're right in terms of the large sources of money that come into councils in respect of various government monies. In terms of the statutory financial statements, they are once if the council receive the money, then obviously they're accounted for. I don't think we have any particular concerns about any specific items in Barnet's accounts. What we look for in those contexts is where if monies are given to the council with conditions, that those conditions are applied properly, and therefore the accounting of the income is applied properly. That's the audit procedures we as external auditors will look at. Clearly, from time to time, internal auditors might look at particular projects and particular grants and how the council is managing the expenditure. So from an external audit viewpoint, we're satisfied that all the monies that the council has received from central government are properly accounted for, deferred where they need to be deferred.
Now, Paul, I understand that, but we had one case a couple of years ago where we lost a couple of £1 million because we forgot to ask for it. Right. And it's also the question of other pots of money that could become available to the council if we apply for them. And I don't know if there is any mechanism in any local authority for actually overseeing that process. You would?
I think that's very difficult, I might say so. I mean, the whole time government are coming out with grants that you can bid for. There must be about 3 at this moment in time, I think, quite sizable pots of money. But it's entirely up to each local authority, of course, whether they decide they wish to bid for them. And therefore, it's not really an auditable matter, I think, because it's a policy matter whether they bid. Because if they bid for them, there's no guarantee they're going to get the money anyway. So it's very difficult to track all those. Normal local authority, obviously, the director would recommend if there were to be a bid, what sort of bid it would be and what it would be. It would be something probably in your corporate plan. But it's, as I say, it's very difficult to actually audit that.
I accept it's difficult. We've now moved to a committee system. under the cabinet system, the relevant director might have said to his lead member, the government have announced this bidding process, do you think it's worth our while bidding for it? Under the committee system, there isn't a lead member who's got the authority to make that decision. So where does it go? And who is actually making those decisions? But anyhow, I throw that out as a sort of an observation. I'd be interested to see what other people have to say in other discussions. Jeff?
I think it should be the responsibility of the Policy and Resources Committee, which I believe is chaired by the leader of the council. And I would have thought from an officer point of view, it would be a good idea to give somebody the overarching view of all that, all those opportunities, and to make sure that things aren't falling through the cracks.
Okay, I'm conscious of time. We've actually deferred the item, so we'll have to fix a date. Right, can we move on then to item 8?
Chairman, how the pension fund report? Yeah, which we need to.
Sorry. Well, the pension fund report was circulated at the same time as another. This one, which I also received. But this is going to the pension fund committee on the 29th.
That's correct. In terms of the paper that was circulated today, it's simply an update of the original that we sent out with the original pack.
Right.
And there are not many significant changes, and what we've tried to do is highlight within the updated version dated the 21st of July in red all of the changes, which I'm quite happy to take the committee through very quickly. Happy to say overall there are no significant issues in there, but there are one or two things that I'd like to draw to the committee's attention to do so we share this meeting.
Okay. Do you want to quickly run through those?
Thank you, Chairman. So the paper we're looking at is the one of the ones that's got the red highlighted figures as of the 21st of July. Very quickly taking through to the executive summary on page 5. Overall, our work is substantially complete, and we intend to give a qualified opinion on the pension fund statements for the year ended 31st of March 2014. Since the report was initially issued back in the beginning of July, we have made some good progress in completing some of the outstanding pieces of work. Very briefly, the bank confirmations that we were expecting, we've now got that. The last was received yesterday. And similarly, the work we're doing on the pension fund annual report has now been completed, and there are no significant issues I need to bring to your attention. The third area of work that was outstanding was on specifically on the pension strength balance within the contributions. As well, I'll very quickly touch on that later on in the report. Moving on to page 6 of that report, again focusing on the red items in there. In terms of the work that we've done on both the pension funds strain as well as the net asset statements, we identified one non-trivial error and one trivial error within the pension funds statements and the net assets respectively. We've highlighted the values within the 2 bullet points there. What I can say is that in terms of our opinion, those 2 balances are not material. And in relation to that, that's one of the decisions the management takes in terms of whether they choose to amend the accounts in respect of those balances. And in this instance, management has decided not to adjust for those balances. And again, it's one of the points that the committee will need to consider manager's response in respect of that, and that was their recommendation in respect of that. Again, just to emphasize, it is not material for our opinion, so it is standard practice in that sense that in terms of the response from management, which is set out on page 15 of the report, and page 15 of the report, which we headed up on adjusted this statement, just sets out a bit more detail on those two items that we flagged up. The other few changes to just bring to your attention, at the time the papers were sent out, the draft opinion on the pension fund statement had not been finalised as we were waiting for further guidance from the Audit Commission. That has now been finalised, and we've included that in this basic pack within Appendix B. The only other item that we flagged up as being outstanding within the report is set out on page 11, the second table, which is related to the reconciliation of member data as at the year end. Information we received from earlier on today confirms that actually that information will be made available to us by Thursday. We do not expect that will cause any significant issue for us in terms of the opinion. So please be confident that we'll get that information and we should be able to finish that off without any significant issues.
Those issues going to be sorted out between now and the 29th.
Absolutely, and we can provide an updated report, updated position on this for the committee, pension companies and others. I'm going to just pause there and simply just take questions in terms of the original report or any updated positions that was circulated.
Any questions?
Yes, can I ask a question that's really one of understanding what we've been asked to do? Because what we had is an excellent report about the audit and the issues that arose in the audit, which is similar to the report we had on the general accounts about the audit and the issues that had arisen in the audit, which were very few, which is very different than being asked to approve the accounts, in that you've given us a report on the audit. I have to say, in other bodies that I've been party to, I've been asked to approve accounts, then I've had a report on the accounts, not just on the audit. That's really a big part of the process of approval. And as a new member, the thing I'm confused about is I'm very happy to include the basis of the report of the auditors, and the audit has taken place properly. I've read the papers, and they've obviously done the things that they should have done, and that is all fine. But that doesn't tell me that the accounts and the issues in the accounts in terms of how they're explained and presented are actually been dealt with, which I think is the issue that we were coming to earlier. And therefore, I think it's very difficult on the basis of that for any members to say that they understand and are comfortable with the actual accounts, even if they are very comfortable with the audit process of review of those accounts. And therefore, I don't quite understand in the context of this committee what it is that we're being asked to do. Because if we're being asked to approve the audit, that all makes perfect sense, and the papers are all designed to allow us to do that, or convert the audit statement properly. But that isn't the same as saying that we understand and are comfortable with the accounts themselves. And I think that's the sort of dilemma which the current system of this committee presents a new member. And I apologise, I want to be at the training, but I'm not sure the training itself enabled anyone to understand either the pension accounts or the main accounts in a way that they would be comfortable putting their hand up and saying, yes, this is okay. It's just something that the committee may want to reflect on in terms of what it's actually being asked to do.
So as a point of clarity, in terms of the pension fund accounts, also they are included in members' packs in Appendix A that was distributed. From the view of the Audit Committee are asked to approve the pension fund accounts, and it is with the Audit Committee, not the Pension Fund Committee. In this case, obviously, we have to consider the accounts in Appendix A, along with the ISA 260 report provided by Grant Thornton. The accounts of the pension fund then do go forward to the pension fund committee, and I'm partly coming from Mr. Miller and asked for this one, and they form part of the pension fund annual statement, and then they produce those from during the year, and this is one of the key documents that go with it. From a wider governance perspective, obviously the council to issue its final statement of accounts for 13-14. That's made up of three key statements. The annual governance statement, the audit committee, seen and agreed. The actual statement of accounts, that's the item we'll be able to further into in August, as well as the pension fund statements that are forming part of that overall pack. So as I understand from this perspective, the audit committee are being asked to approve the pension funds accounts that are being presented in members' packs. This will then go forward to the pension committee on the 29th for noting, and then form part of the pension funds annual report that because I partly get Mr. Miller to confirm that I believe goes up in September.
The annual report has already been circulated, it's in the public domain for consideration by Pension Fund Committee next week on the 29th, and the Pension Fund annual report includes the statement of accounts.
They approve the accounts, we're approving the audit. Is that right?
The Pension Fund terms of reference include approving the annual report, but not the statement of accounts.
So under the audit committee's terms of reference, it says under point 17 to review and approve the annual statement of accounts. And the pension fund is part of the annual accounts.
That's exactly my point, which is the papers that we've been presented with allow us to review the audit, not the accounts. And that
The accounts and accounts the reports.
Pension fund accounts is
pension fund accounts. I understand that I'm making a different point, which is that in order to review a set of accounts, unless this is simply a rubber stamp, somebody made the point earlier, in order to review a set of accounts, you need more in the audit findings. In that we've been asked to review material that is complex and quite difficult to understand. And all I'm saying is that in terms of the paperwork that goes, I mean, you found it necessary to put an explanatory forward to the main accounts. I don't think there's an explanatory forward to the pension fund accounts. The pension fund accounts are in two documents. They're quite difficult to tie together because they use different assumptions at different places. The question was asked of the meeting in relation to the £10 million deficit. No one was able to answer that question, despite the fact that it is clearly laid out in the notes to the main accounts in note 45, where there's a detailed explanation of that 10 million difference. And therefore my concern is that if members are being asked to actually approve the accounts rather than simply to observe the audit findings, we need to think for future occasions what papers might actually help members do that.
I think, hearing the point that the council is making, rather than jump to a conclusion on this one, but given the fact that this meeting takes place so close to the pension fund meeting, would be helpful as a starting point next year to ensure that alongside this paper you see the annual report. So I think would give you the explanatory context that you would need to.
In fact, I think that it was merely an accident of other matters that the pension fund meeting was supposed to occur a couple of weeks ago and was delayed because of the problems with membership of committees, and therefore the order that this would ordinarily take place was the pension fund committee could look at the accounts and then give some comfort to the audit committee that they were actually satisfied with the numbers as a technical matter.
Okay. Right, Steve. the pension fund account is all part of this. Are members happy with the answers they've had on the audit report? Can I try and take that? Yeah? Okay. That deals with that. Can I, having deferred the item, it's been suggested to me that a number of members on this committee are also on the pension fund committee, which is meeting on the 29th, which is a week's time. If we arrange a deferred meeting to follow the pension fund committee, would that make sense? That gives people a week. Only before or after? Well, given the pension fund committee going to look at the
So if you're on the debate here, you probably only need an hour to consider the accounts again.
Yeah.
So from 6 to 7.
members happy with that?
I think that's
We
a
actually only need
I
3
think that's a reasonable compromise, Chair. A week is a reasonable amount of time to read a document of this sort. We regularly read longer documents in this time.
Just remind us again.
29th, it's a week's time, and if we met at 6 o'clock, in practice it only needs 3 people to be there to approve the accounts. So if you haven't got any questions and you can't come, providing I have at least 3 members present, we will satisfy all our standing orders. So,
And if there are any questions, they can be
yeah.
Yeah, the members briefing at 6 o'clock on children's services.
I think that is going to be cancelled anyway.
I don't know, that's still put in the diary.
Well, it's a week, we think that's big cancelled. Okay. Right, so we're going to move on. Okay, let's move on. Item 8, head of internal audit. We're on page 143. Caroline.
Thank you, Chair. 14 internal audits that we conducted. We've already fed into the annual governance statement, which was one of the things that was discussed earlier, so I'll go through it fairly briefly. The majority of the reports that we issued in 13-14 would be satisfactory or substantial assurance, which is why we've given an overall rating of the year of satisfactory assurance. In 13-14, that was 66% of the reports, compared to the prior year, it was 60%, so it's an improvement on the prior year. I think the main role of the audit committee this evening is to just note the 4 improvement areas that were noted, which again fit into the annual governance statement. So these are on page 154 onwards. The 4 areas were systems needing to ensure the integrity and security of data, business continuity and resilience, roles, responsibilities and accountabilities, and contract management framework. And then on page 159, just highlight that where we raise the priority 1 recommendations during the year, we always go back to check that they've been implemented within the agreed timescales. And I'm pleased to say that in 13-14, 100% of those recommendations were implemented by the end of the year. And I'm happy to take any questions if anyone has them.
Sorry, as a new member, could you please tell me, what are Swift and Wisdom?
Swift and Wisdom are 2 systems used by adult social services. So Swift is the social work care management system, and Wisdom is the electronic document retention system.
And then page 159 at the end of the document, this was referenced earlier as well. The lack of consistency in no consistent contract management framework, and so there's weaknesses in benefits management and benefits realisation. I just indeed what's being done about it. What actions are in place to ensure that this is being dealt with?
I'll just give a, so again, it's all come up in the next item, but just to give you some comfort, Councillor, you can also draw some comfort, I think, from the external auditor's report actually in relation to the two major contracts with traffic is specifically related or principally related to the contract management arrangements in relation to Barnet Homes. And as I mentioned, we will be hearing about progress relations in the next item. But it was, I can see how the way this is really useful, because it was more specific. It was more specific than that.
Thank you.
Says all council contracts, it's not a mutual crisis.
So sorry, Councillor, this was an audit that was discussed quite fully, I think, at the last meeting of the audit committee, and was specifically in relation to the contract management framework that's in place for monitoring the Barnet Homes contract, which is now some 10 years old, and I think attracted some robust observations from all the contractors.
Should that statement be rewritten basically if you're talking about one contract, because it is saying it's not consistent in place across all the council contracts. So you look at all the contracts, very specifically.
As the one specific audit that we did was looking at the contract management framework, and as part of that we looked at CSG specifically and Barnet Homes. And the main problems we found were on Barnet Homes, which was given no assurance. The contract management of that was given a no assurance rating. But when pulling the opinion together, I look at all of the audits we've done throughout the year, look at the key themes that have been identified across those audits. So the contract management issue cropped up across other audits as well. So when we looked at the PFI contract, for example, and then in the plan 14-15, we're doing another review looking at the new framework that's being introduced, and the commercial director, Claire Simons, is here to will be working on that audit in the coming week.
Can I ask, because Barnet Homes is highlighted with a no, just suspect on, if I had my black and white papers in colour, it would probably be in red. What exactly is the problem with Barnet Homes and with the others that are unlocked as
It might make more sense for us to discuss that in the quarterly audit report, because we've completed the follow-up against that audit and found that all one of those recommendations have been implemented now. So it might be more sense to go to the
We'll come back to that later. Okay. Any other questions?
Can I ask on, what's that page 20 is? In the list on page 20, I think charges for legal services is
Page
being highlighted.
167 of the committee pages, not page 20.
Oh, that's right, thank you. Yeah, I've got that one. Charges for legal services are mentioned there, and they were mentioned on page 164 as well. Could you just outline what the problem was?
Again, that will be talked about in more detail when I talk about the quarter one report, but we did an audit looking at financial management across the council, and the one aspect which we gave limited assurance to was for the HB Public Law contract, how the charges were being recharged to delivery units across the council. And again, the recommendations have been implemented so that that's much clearer, and so that delivery units are able to monitor their budgets more accurately and anticipate what the charges are going to be.
Okay. Can we know the report? We'll move on to the capital report on page 169.
Thank you, Chair. Members that were here at the last committee meeting will know that we brought on their work plan for the year a new item, which would be that we would be reporting quarterly on the progress against the annual work plan. So this is the first time that we presented a quarterly report on CAP to the committee. Significant piece of information to update the committee on that's happened since we had the last meeting in detail on page 174 of the pack is that I believe it was Councillor Cook raised the question at the last committee relating to the transfer to the DWP Single Investigation Service, which is a national fraud service that will investigate all welfare benefits going forward. And since we have met with the last committee, we have been informed by the DWP that we will now have our transfer date for Barnet to be the 1st of July 2015. At that point, all benefit fraud investigation responsibility cases and staff who undertake that work will transfer under Tubular regulations to the DWP. That will no longer be the responsibility of the council, and therefore that will no longer be reported to the committee. Moving on to the report, if I can bring your attention to section 1, which is detailed on pages 176 and on 177. As detailed in the CAF annual work plan, we undertook to take some joint proactive reviews in conjunction with internal audit, and the outcomes of the CAF element of those reviews are detailed there. One of them is in relation to your choice Barnet and a piece of work that CAF specifically undertook in validating employees' right to work. And I can just update the committee that since publishing the papers, although we undertook a review of 123 employee files, 89 were validated and 34 were still subject to our review. As of today, we've reduced that 34 number to 19. That's not to say that there's 19 staff that don't have the right to work, it's just that the paperwork is not collated in one central place, and we're working very closely with your choice Barnet to ensure that that happens, and we're reviewing those on a daily basis and they're treating that as a priority. The review that we undertook with internal audit in relation to disabled blue badges, we conducted a specific review again of applications that were made, but where applicants have not attended an appointment to come in and validate their identity, which would allow their application to process to them having a badge. And the results are listed there, and the full results of the audit and any recommendations that were made in relation to that will be dealt with in the next item, which Caroline will be introducing, which will be the quarter 1 progress report. Moving on to section 2, which is the performance indicators from page 177 onwards. I've just put out a few highlights for the committee. In terms of amount of council tax single person discount fraud that's been identified in the first quarter this year, that's just over £22,000. Moving on to page 178, in terms of the number of ongoing benefit fraud investigations, there's currently 244 at the end of quarter 1, and we've achieved 15 sanctions. For members, for new members to the committee, a sanction is either something that we can offer a benefit claimant if we have proven that they have committed benefit fraud, and depending on the severity of that fraud and the amount of overpayment and the circumstances, in accordance with our policy and DWP guidance, we can either issue them with a caution, we can issue them with something called an administrative penalty, which is basically a fine, a percentage of the overpayment, or we will prosecute them, and the details are broken down there for you to see. Under the corporate fraud team, we have 33 ongoing investigations, which is everything that is not benefit or tenancy related fraud. And within that 33, 19 of those investigations resulted from the proactive review that we undertook with internal audit in relation to disabled blue badges. In quarter 1, the corporate fraud team, the investigations they undertook has resulted in one staff member being dismissed, and the details of that dismissal and that case are detailed on page 181 for the committee members. Committee members that was here at the last meeting will note that I updated the committee in relation to the transfer of the responsibility of tenancy fraud from Barnet Homes to CAF, to Council, and we reported last year on the figures, so I'm very pleased to report that that work has continued, and that in the first quarter alone we have recovered 17 properties that we believe tenancy fraud was being committed at. The Audit Commission's value that they applied to the recovery of a property is £150,000 per property. So that's over £2.5 million worth of council assets that we've managed to get back in the first quarter, and we've prevented 5 right to buy applications from proceeding due to our interventions and our investigations. If I can just bring the committee's attention to page 180 and 181, there are some noteworthy investigation summaries there relating to some sample benefit fraud investigations, an example of what a tenancy fraud investigation is, and the detail of the one staff dismissal. Happy to take any questions from the committee.
Any questions?
Can I ask on page page 177, the total amount of error overpayments identified in the benefits system, 262,000. Is that a big figure, a small figure, an average figure? It seems big to me.
It is a large figure, but it is comparable to what we've identified consistently year on year. So it's about average for what the amount of staff that we have looking at benefit fraud in the council.
Are you able to put that in a context of total budget and benefit payments paid out? It sounds like you're on, I know we pay out.
We pay out 200 million a year.
It's 200 million. If you put it in that context, it doesn't look quite as much.
The national percentage of fraud and error identified in anyone in the benefits system overall is 2%. And our figures about in line with that.
We do pretty well. Can I just ask, possibly because I don't know the answer, when it comes to sanctions and prosecutions and court orders, do we actually have a policy of what actions are taken? And how much discretion do officers have?
We have a framework called the Accountable Framework, which is approved at this committee annually. And within that framework, we have a fraud policy, and we also have a prosecution policy, which sets out how we apply those sanctions. However, in relation to benefit fraud, we also have to comply with the DWP's fraud and error strategy and their policies as well. So there can be an amount of discretion that can be applied, which we refer to as the public interest test, and that's set out by the Criminal Prosecution Service, and there's some key elements that we have to look at within that, and every decision that's made is documented against our policy, DWP policy, and if it's in the public interest test, what action to take.
And my other question is about the transfer of that responsibility to the DWP. What are, apart from the staff leaving and being tutored over, are there any financial consequences for the authority?
So at this stage, we do not believe that there will be any financial consequences to the authority. However, the council does receive a housing benefit subsidy administration grant, which goes through to the benefit service, which is run through via CSG Capita, and DWP have indicated that in future years that grant will reduce, but they haven't indicated how much that will reduce for. But there will be no financial impact that's known for the transfer for CAP in particular. I think that it's what you need to understand, and the whole reason for transferring to the National Benefit Service is that it is linked very closely to the implementation of universal credit, so that there will be one welfare benefit that's paid out and one national benefit investigation service that investigates it. Obviously, this is just a period of transition, and there's a 2 to 3 year period where all councils will be transferring, and HMRC investigation services for tax credits will be transferring to the DWP in readiness for the universal credit investigation service.
That makes an awful lot of sense to me, but somewhere at the back of my mind, I had a feeling that certainly at one time, councils received cash incentives out of detecting benefit fraud. Clearly, if we're not going to be doing that detection work, we're not going to get that cash benefit. And I don't know whether that's still...
So that particular incentive, I think, I'm not sure of the year, but it's a very long time ago that it went away.
Right. Sorry.
Can I ask a question about page 176? When you were talking about the 34 cases that you got down to 19 and the difficulties in terms of that the information wasn't collected together on one page, are we going to hear in the progress report that processes have been changed to try and make that better?
So in the progress report, the full details of that audit are not actually detailed, and there's an error in my report because that actually will be, that detail will be provided in Q2, because that report is actually out in draft at the moment with the service, and we're just in the process of agreeing management responses and implementation dates. But yes, that is one of the recommendations that is in the report within draft, and it's a priority one recommendation, and I believe that the draft management response says that it will be dealt with, within the next month or so.
Thank you, Chair. So just a point for Lawrence. As your DWP is taking over this taxing, what is the relationship between what you have with us, this committee, and the members? How is that going to change, if anything?
No, not at all. So the DWP is not taking over the CAF team. Staff that are currently within the CAF team, whose primary and sole role is to investigate benefit fraud, will transfer to the DWP. The CAF team will remain within the council, and they will still have responsibilities that they have now other than investigating benefit fraud. So they will still be investigating tenancy fraud, corporate fraud, any other kind of fraud, all the proactive exercises that they conduct and the work they continue with internal audit.
But we won't get any information on benefit fraud because it will be...
No, we will not be responsible for benefit fraud, and therefore we will not be reporting on it after the 1st of July.
Just verify on that. Housing benefit will be administered by us. So for
a period of time, housing benefit will be administered by the council until there's a full national implementation of universal credit, which will be then implemented by the DWP. Housing benefit will be investigated by a new fraud investigation service, which will be run by the DWP. So they'll still be working very closely with the housing benefit service and possibly elements of the CAF team, but the full details of the transfer are not yet known.
Councillor, if I may, I think Claire's being incredibly polite about this. There is a school of thought that says that this is a spectacularly bad idea, and goes against most of the principles of localism to which we would subscribe in its authority. Certainly I subscribe to. I think if you work on the premise that universal credit will be implemented nationally according to the national timetable, then there is a logic that the fraud service would follow that. But I think the loss for us is potentially intangible in relation to sort of the level of local knowledge, and I think as you're alluding to, the level of local accountability that goes with that. And I think there's certainly a view amongst my treasurer colleagues across London that this is someone in DWP has a particular bee in their bonnet about the rigour with which benefit fraud is pursued, and that they believe that running it centrally will lead to a better level of detection. And my view is that that won't be the case.
Time will tell. There's also an argument that people move around so much these days, that actually being able to track them centrally would make it easier to detect the fraud. Anyhow, can we go for a report? Agree? Let's come to agenda item 10, which is the exception report. Carol.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the Q1 report of the Internal Audit Service. over the period, we issued 8 reports, which were all from the 14-15 panel that approved in April. 2 of these reports were given limited assurance. There's a public health and safety matters, which I'll go into more detail shortly. And then I'll take questions. That's all right. And then 2 were given satisfactory assurance. So the way we look at the exceptions reports, that we don't provide you any detail on those reports, but from now on we started publishing them on the website so you can get access to the full reports. Also just to note that this quarter we had a very large number of follow-ups to undertake against previous recommendations, 22 recommendations to follow up, so that's quite a large chunk of the report. So just moving on to page 189.
Would it be helpful if we took each of the issues one after the other? Because the first one is public health. If anyone's got questions on the public health.
And we've got officers here to very kindly voicing the meeting.
Very patiently, we've got
Dr. Andrew Brown, who's the Joint Director of Public Health.
I hope you found the rest of the meeting interesting. I should just be able to clarify if anyone's got any questions.
And Claire Simons, the Commercial Customer Services Director.
Okay. Any questions on public health? Kathy?
Page 190, and the penultimate bottom point. There was a contract of 743,000 with no key performance indicator. Could you just clarify what that was about?
So I'll hand over to Andrew.
Yes, you recall that the public health transferred from the NHS into local government on the 1st of April 2013, and we novated all the contracts were novated to the council. Therefore, we had no input into agreeing those contracts or putting KPIs into them. So it is not good, but we have no control over it by the council.
Sorry, could you just briefly say what the contracts were about?
This contract, I think, was one of the drugs and alcohol contracts. We have a number of contracts. I don't have the list with me tonight. There are a number of contracts. There are sexual health contracts, drug and alcohol service contracts, school nursing contracts, and a lot more smaller ones, but those are the 3 major contracts.
Thank you.
They do have.
Are you saying that the NHS, when they set these up, didn't put any KPIs in them at all?
Yes. And that isn't necessarily unusual. And one of the challenges was that these are massive contracts from the NHS, and they cover a vast range of services. And they don't, people up here, have KPIs in each and every service, and any part of the services are transferred to us. Sorry, I should add, they do have KPIs now.
They do that. That was my next question.
Thank you, Chair. Dr. Howe and I work on the Health Open Security Committee together, and anyway, it's quite sad to have you here to wrap your knuckles a little bit. But one of the, just the point before Councillor Levine made on page 190, third-party contract, that's really quite worrying that, how a council are not providing our auditors with the information that they want, which is a third-party contract management for the priority one. That's really quite worrying. I mean, given that we work with them on public law as well, and there were, I think, Councillor Levine raised earlier on, problems, very similar reasons to that. I mean, is there perhaps this is something better done to other members? Is there something we need to be worried about in our relationship with Aaron?
Just to sort of clarify on that particular recommendation, really we have to draw a line under it and say that we have waited a certain amount of time to receive information, and in order to be able to report back to the committee, we have to say at that point we can't provide assurance over those items. But since received assurances from Andrew that the documents are available, etc. So we will give you a bit more information on that.
Okay, but have we established why we weren't getting that information when we asked for it, given we are nominally supposed to be 50-50 partners in both?
So the information was provided out of time. I apologise for that. I think that within, so I don't think this is a separate problem in Harrow. This was a capacity issue within my team. We were prioritising actually trying to sort these contracts out and put the into them. And due to staff shortages as well, I think that was one of the key reasons. I think we've got much better now at closing information, so I don't think this will happen.
And last question to Mr. Naylor. Attendance at the Joint Public Health Government Board meetings, what?
To represent my representative.
So,
That's nice, I agree, and all members conversing about it. We'll be speaking strong terms to the individuals who are on there.
so is it that you're not being invited?
No, it's so just to be absolutely clear about it, this is essentially who is the finance person who goes to the meeting, did not attend it, 2 meetings to be reviewed, simply what was finding is taking the same.
Can I put the question slightly different way, Chris? Had the finance officers been there, would these issues have been raised earlier?
Possibly.
Well, I mean, there must be some point in their being there.
Sorry, if I can
Team Christmas.
if I can say, part of the audit essentially meant that we've actually reviewed the commercial relationship with public health. And actually on tomorrow we've got the next Public Health Governance Board where we will have appropriate representation not only from finance but from governance, commercial team as well. So I think the audit actually focus down on what people need to do at each of those meetings, and we'll be reviewing the terms of reference for that meeting and actually putting some more structure in place for the relationship as required by the audit.
Okay. My last question, I haven't seen anyone else's hand up. Oh, sorry. I'll ask mine now, I can't see it. Has this been shared with the Health Scrutiny Committee?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Or the Health and Wellbeing Board, whoever controls that?
And there is the health and all this scrutiny still going on, and there's a separate article.
Yeah.
That you,
Well, have these audit concerns been taken up with members involved in the Health and Wellbeing Board or the Health Scrutiny?
they should take it to the health and overview because they are the ones who approved the authority agreement at a meeting about, I can't remember now, but 6 months, 9 months ago.
I would say that, sorry, through you, Chair, all papers come here because it's in their audit committee's terms of reference, but the committee can then refer on to other committees in your papers.
Yeah, well, it just seems to me, coming here in isolation, if the members who are effectively overseeing the conference aren't aware, and I wonder how many of the people attending the meetings of the governance board actually knew that those officers were supposed to be there.
I think previously we would always, when we send a final report back to officers, ask them to share it with their new member, whereas now we would ask them to share it with the appropriate chair.
Okay.
Which I have.
Good. Okay. Sorry.
As Karen I don't know if it's appropriate to sort of allow me to do that. On page 193, you say in preparation of the commission team and PA are reviewing the current committee and making recommendations. when it is mentioned that this area was approved by the Health and Overview City Committee, one thing that bothers me, still bothers me about now, it was painted all rosy. Did you have a look again, if you are reviewing this document, that there are risks involved if things go belly up, and nothing says who shares the risk, how much the risk will fall upon and how much will fall on arrow. But there is a bit, if you read the document, it tells everything so rosy, but nothing is mentioned, you think, relevant. If you're going to review it, I suggest you have a look at that.
Okay. Should we move on to the next one? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The next report is disabled blue badges, which was the first joint internal audit account for the year that we've undertaken this year. Claire is remaining seated, and Anna Earnshaw is also here from CSG, if any questions are needed for them. I'll just take you briefly through the findings. The main issue that we had was that there was not a formal operating level agreement in place between the assisted travel blue badge service. There is the service level agreement in place, but you would expect there to be a more detailed operating level agreement in place as well for each aspect of the service being provided. And then the second main finding was around the proactive arrangements for identifying blue badge misuse and basically the communication channels between the various involved parties, so between parking, assisted travel, which recently became part of CSG, and also the CAP. So the recommendation has come out of the report for more a protocol to be agreed between those relative parties. So again, happy to take questions as well.
Thank you. This is an issue that's been brought to me by a constituent of mine who described a Kafkaesque bureaucratic process of trying to get disabled elderly mothers blue badge renewed. There's clearly also a problem with fraud, given the number of, when you did the survey, the number of problems that you found. So you've got problems at both ends in terms of getting smooth service for people who are genuine and fraudulent situation at the other end, and residents clearly have strong concerns about that. But when you're renewing your disabled badge, and let's say we're talking here about people who are not trying to do anything, you have to go to, there are only 2 centres in Barnet that you can go to, is that right? And you have to go once a year? Sorry.
In terms of the process, which was actually changed by a central government in February this year, some people do have to go through to an assessment centre. And picking up the point you made about constituents raising concerns, I've personally dealt with a number of complaints from people who, firstly, in terms of changing the process, which is out of our control, it is a central government process, which actually meant that some people who had had a blue badge for a very long time were then subsequently not eligible, caused a great deal of distress to a number of people. Equally, actually going to the assessment centre equally causes people distress, but it is the process that we're required to follow to make sure that the process to renew a badge is followed. So I do take on board your comments, and certainly we've dealt with a number of people who have, it is a distressing thing for someone to do for something that they see as so necessary for their life, but it is a process we have to follow as set out by central government.
Yeah, and I think it's also just that clearly there are large categories, a large number of people in the category of disabled permanently who are not going to, if somebody is elderly and has a disability that stops them from driving, I think it would be fair to say a common sense solution might be rather a lighter touch one. Have you investigated what we can do in the context of the new legislation? Does this have to be an annual process? Do we have on file the details of a registered representative for each of these elderly and vulnerable people, so that we make sure that we recontact the same person in a timely way? It isn't in the case of a vulnerable person, them getting the letter, then the letter gets lost and so forth. That we have
The things that we can do to smooth this, take the point that this has come down on you from above, and you're trying to deal with that, and you've heard these complaints. What steps can we take as a borough to make this a smooth process for those residents who are trying to do this and not get caught up in that?
I think the audit highlights the real balancing act that we actually have to do to make this process as simple as possible, but also with an eye to my CAF colleagues over there to avoid as much form as possible. So one of the steps we talked about in the report was to remove the face-to-face contract to prove who you were, which our customers really didn't like to do. They're having a blue badge for a number of years, and they're saying, why do I have to come in every year to prove I am? Our CAF colleagues quite rightly raised the fact that we have to make sure that we don't have any fraudulent claims as well. And that's part of the process, that we do want to make it as simple as possible, but we do have to abide by the guidance written down. And one of the points you made about somebody with a disability that may have their situation changed, certainly the complaint that I dealt with recently, in a common sense way, I couldn't understand why this person was no longer eligible for a blue badge. Going back to the guidance given, quite clearly they were not. So again, it's one of those things where it's very difficult, without looking at individual cases, to explain to people why their circumstances have changed. But we do absolutely acknowledge that people have to be dealt with sensitivity and in a way that we actually understand their needs. We also have been talking to people, something I got recently. Although we have dealt with this individual over a number of years, her situation had changed, therefore each year she was providing more information. Now, in her view, she felt that we were asking her for more and more, but each time when you looked at what was actually being asked for, it was actually a clarification of what had changed in the previous year. So take on board your point, and our CSG colleagues are very keen to make sure this process is not as intrusive, as not as distressing as it can be, but abiding by the guidance in terms of making sure that we don't fall into fraudulent use, but also abiding by the guidance given to us by the central government.
Thank you.
Can I just add to that the renewal process is for every 3 years, not an annual process.
Right.
So when a badge is issued, it's valid for 3 years. So what Carol's referring to would happen every 3 years, not every year.
Well, I think when someone qualifies for one at the age of 80, they're hardly likely to get better by the time they're 83. Yeah.
Some blue badges are issued for carers because the disabled person very often is mentally and physically disabled. So how does that verification process work in that case? And is the number of people on the CAF side of this joint investigation on page 177 towards the top? It says 20 people will not be contacted. Is that relevant to this category of people?
Sorry, I may be wrong, if I thought they were issued to the person who's needed it, not to the carer. But they can only be used, if a carer is carrying it around, they can only use it if they've got that person with them.
Yeah, that's sure. Yeah.
That's the problem is with the enforcement. And there's a line in here somewhere about relationships with NSL parking wardens and making sure that works. And then there's an easy way of them reporting people who they think are abusing it.
Yeah. There are people with learning difficulties and also physical difficulties who have blue badges, I understand, not because they drive themselves, but because a carer drives them.
Yeah, but the blue badge is issued to them, not to the carer.
Okay, so what's the verification process in that case?
Well,
my understanding is it's exactly the same verification process, but the is used by the person driving the vehicle.
So does this person have to turn up face to face and say, but two people, a carer and the...
we've just been told face-to-face interviews no longer take place.
That has in the past?
Well, it has in the past.
Because the government decreed it?
Yeah. My concern, I haven't had a chance to check it, but is the information about how you apply for it and what's needed actually up to date on our website? Because I've had a constituent on to me, actually not formally, informally, saying that it was just a complete mess, and they waited, and then for our face-to-face, and then been told, actually, you don't need it. I think it got caught up in that change of period.
Yeah, it may well have done. So the actual removal of the face-to-face verification process of identity was removed on the 16th of June. So there may have been some confusion over the month of June about what we were actually doing.
If I could add, I've done a piece of casework on this as well with somebody who's had a blue badge for many years and now has had it taken away and has been very distressed about it. And I wonder if there is some issue about the fact we didn't have a formal operating level agreement about how people are dealt with that is causing the problem. Because there's three or four of us now who've had casework in it, so there's a big issue out there on it.
Yeah, it's nothing new.
I know, but it is a big issue, isn't it?
And the fraud's a big issue too, and that's the...
Yeah, but these are people who've had badges for years,
I know.
and now they're losing them, and that's very distressing for them.
I don't think it's actually related to the OLA issue. The OLA is actually the agreement between the council and CFG about how they will actually manage the process. The eligibility criteria is, as I said, set down by student government, so that would be why it's
I mean, the complaints I've had about the process, and obviously they weren't happy with the outcome, but they were not happy with the process either.
Okay, can we move on from blue badges? Because I'm conscious we've got 10 minutes
Yeah,
left.
so can we just have assurances and that things that are being put into place to make sure
Yeah, in order to answer the recommendations and work will be continuing on those recommendations.
And again, we'll follow them up, check that they're implemented on the next report.
Okay, can we carry on to the report?
Thank you, Chair. Shall I just run through the last few pages? So page 201 just tells me some changes to our plan. We always report to you if we make changes to the plan that was made at the beginning of the year. And page 203 gives you the full list of all of the work that we've completed so far in quarter one. 204 is work in progress, and the audits that are currently underway. 205 is we have effective indicators which we report back to you every quarter.
Just very briefly, page 203, the troubled families claimed by results and adoption reform grant. It says the page before that there were no significant issues noted. So why don't, instead of getting a not applicable assurance, why don't they get the significant assurance or whatever the top assurance rating is?
I guess because they are treated slightly differently in that they are assurance projects, certifying grant expenditure as opposed to a review of controls.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. We'll move on to appendix E.
Thank you, Chair. So Appendix E is, I mentioned earlier, we have a lot of recommendations to follow up in this quarter, 22 in total. I think because of the time I won't go through them in detail, but happy to take questions. I guess that's just to point out that of the 22, there are two which are partly implemented, whereas they have been expected to be implemented by now, so perhaps I'll focus on those. On page 209, there's one partly implemented recommendation against Barnet Homes contract management. This was around the benefits realisation for that contract. We subsequently agreed with the commercial team a new implementation date of April 2015. I don't know, perhaps if you have questions, okay, that's that. But if not, I'll move on. Page 216, which is the other partly implemented recommendation, which is around Swift and Wisdom. 219.
So there's one part of the implemented recommendation which was due to be implemented by now, which is around the SWIFT upgrade project. So we mentioned it earlier, this is the social work case management system, and Matthew Kendall's here, Assistant Director from Adults, who I'm sure will be happy to answer any questions if you have any. But again, we've got a new implementation date of November, and we will get back and confirm that that's been implemented by that date.
Can I take you back to page 211? Item 1A, IT access controls.
Very briefly, we have to finish at 10 o'clock.
Very briefly, what was the nature of the problem? Were there no access controls?
I would say there were significant weaknesses identified around access controls.
And in real summary, it was principally related to people leaving the organisation.
Right. Jeff? Yes, very quickly, Chair. I think this report is one of the more important ones that we get in the past. I think it's been further on the agenda, and I just want to put in a plea to where we are holding service managers to account. It's not done in 5 minutes just before 10 o'clock. It's earlier on the agenda. I take your point. It's not every meeting.
One of just final comment is that to have achieved that sort of 20 recommendations being implemented out of the 22 was a significant amount of work from officers and a lot of cooperation, so just to say that.
But that's very good. On 224, business continuity, how do we check that our contractors have got business continuity plans in place?
That was tested as part of the audit, so we looked at some of the major contracts and looked at the contract clauses around business continuity and looked at the processes that the commercial team are undertaking to confirm compliance with the council's policies for business continuity.
Thank you.
I was going to say that being sounding good, we turn the power off and we've got a big chart.
Yeah, I know.
You can see what I've got.
Okay, it's
Okay, it's just coming up to 10 o'clock. Matthew, I'm sorry we haven't needed you. I know you found the rest of the meeting interesting. Same for any other officers who've sat through it, and the members of the public. I'm formally going to adjourn this meeting, and it will resume at 6 o'clock on the 29th. Right, that's a technicality which meets the legal requirements. Now, can I just stress, everyone should have, because everyone's here, copies of the reports that were the reason for the adjournment, and that everyone actually has now got paper copies, and to them on paper copies, they've got access to through the internet to copies of the reports. Okay? And if anyone does have questions in the next 7 days, they want to fire out, which will make that gather on please. Okay, thank you very much.